Today I went a bit deeper into the 4-ACO DMT realm and was amply rewarded, or so it has seemed to me. I am a 33-year-old male of good fitness, besides a mild smoker's cough. I have tripped on many occasions in the past with hallucinogens of synthetic and natural origins. Part of my delight with 4-ACO DMT relates to its ability to evoke states of being similar to those I had experienced before with magic mushrooms and ayahuasca. I am not a chemist, but seem to feel myself drawn to the DMT molecule with its various substitutions, since my experiences of other tryptamines, 4-HODAPT, DPT, though colorful, extremely entertaining and often intense, tended to feel somehow alien or inorganic to me. In the UK, since they have banned the sale of magic mushrooms, I couldn't find any access to the headspace I was looking for. I had Yahoo ingredients but was reluctant to embark on the grueling but rewarding journeys they proffered. I'm a postman and it takes a few days to prepare, experience and integrate the ayahuasca experience. I was thus at a loose end. That was until 4-ACO DMT appeared on the scene. After a light lunch I dropped 30 mg wrapped in a Rizla, with a cup of strong milky tea. I read my Sunday paper while listening to a Freddie Hubbard LP, and waited for action. I expected fully to be able to finish reading the particular article I was reading, I'm a quick reader, before the effects arrived. But within 10 minutes I had my first yawn. A big enveloping yawn which, it seemed, my whole body took part in. My previous trips with this stuff had been marked by a lot of yawning, and a sedated body feel. At this point I thought I'd better arrange some tunes for my stereo and retire to my bed. I skinned up a small joint and went to my PC to burn a CD. Sitting at the screen things began to warp and bend, and for the life of me I couldn't settle on a playlist or album to burn that would appeal to my mind state. I'm sure I could have if I'd persevered, but I was feeling more and more sedated, as yawns, staggering in their totality, washed over me. I smoked my joint with joy as each lungful seemed to supercharge the sense of fecund being I was experiencing amidst this potent drowsiness. I held the last lungful in as I staggered upstairs to my bed and exhaled only after I had stripped and dived under the duvet. It took me a while to get warm and comfy so that I could focus inward without distraction. The following experiences took place over an hour. With eyes shut and curled up on my side I lay, breathing slowly but deliberately. My vision was networked with blue-green meshing arranged in patterns following the lines of church-stained glass windows. They seemed to converge towards a point high up, down, left, right, admittedly arbitrary terms in this context. My thoughts were that I'd seen all this mesh and network stuff before, and that while beautiful, I couldn't give it too much meaning. I was feeling quite macho at that moment and thought to myself, I'll push towards the point of convergence in these visual effects. As these thoughts unfolded, I made my breaths deeper, whilst maintaining the regularity. This breathing pattern was bordering between a voluntary and involuntary phenomenon. If I thought about it I could snap out of it. But it didn't feel threatening, so I let it develop freely as it seemed to feed a crescendo of energy in my body and mind. The bodily sensation was as though the volume and shape of my body was a space-like void in which many thousands of tiny stars were sparkling, imparting an exquisite tingling over my body mass. It was a conjunction between the mental imagery I saw in my mind's eye, and the physical sensations washing over me. As I became accustomed to this environment, I became aware that an extension of the sun was forming to the lower left, southwest on the mental map, of my skull. I had also noticed a low hissing in the background of the room, like a transformer or the buzz of an electrical item on standby. Or so I had thought. In the new mental space that had opened up, I began to visualize a cylindrical object, like an elongated jet engine, embossed with many pipes, valves and wires along its length, in glossy black and brass. The end of it adjacent to my skull had some kind of being on it, merged with the body of the device in the fashion of H.R. Giger's biomechanic creations. My breathing pattern had reached a sort of plateau of intensity whose resonance seemed to elicit a kind of communication or signal with the being. The background hissing had become a warm buzzing sound which felt very pleasant. Then suddenly, several louder bursts of hissing/buzzing occurred in concert with fine thin beams of light flashing between the being on the end of the device, and the center of my mind. The fact was I didn't feel threatened or disturbed by this. It seemed to me that the being bore neither good nor malice towards me, and that it was as interested in the phenomenon occurring as I was. I decided, after this vision had faded into more abstract flashing stars of predominantly white, red and blue, to open my eyes for a bit. When I had first shut them, the open eye visuals had been warping and buckling to the angles and planes of my room and furniture. This time however, there were multiple outlines, freeze-frame tracers and a general haziness not unlike the appearance of the soft lens effect used by film cameramen to frame a dramatic heroine issuing a romantic speech. I wobbled the fingers of my right hand before my eyes and was tickled to see a multitude of pudgy fingers jiggling before my eyes, like the tentacles of some exotic sea slug. This was all very amusing, but I wanted to delve back into the crazy mind space of earlier. I had the uncanny feeling that I could induce these kind of encounters by breathing in a certain way, perhaps mild hyperventilation. This time I lay on my back with my arms by my sides, and a towel over my face, and allowed my breathing to follow its semi-autonomous course. The physical feelings in my body were exceedingly pleasant and invigorating to me. I wondered about the erotic dimension this might have, and sure enough this avenue of exploration began to open. Laying flat and writhing a little on the bed, I felt my body tensing pleasurably and a warmth beginning to fill my abdomen and pelvic region. In my mind's eye I visualized a glowing white and red bulbous haze descending above my belly down into me and filling my trunk with an exquisite boost of pleasure. All the plumbing of my nether regions and tummy was pulsing with this sensation, in sympathy with my breathing which was deep and expansive. Accompanied by the rich buzzing sound, it blossomed into what seemed to be a full-body orgasm which lasted some time. I have not had one of these before, but it seemed to be akin to the female orgasm, or so it seemed to me. I'm male, you see. It seemed more global than the basic male model. I always feel us chaps were maybe shortchanged on that score. The orgasm did not result in the need of tissues etc. as I said, not the average type. But deeply satisfying. This glowing haze of pleasure surrounded my mind space and within it visions of a slinkily moving humanoid female flickered towards me and it rolled over my body in the 69 position. She wore a black corset and pointed patent leather boots, and had light green skin of beautiful aroma. Fantastic scenes followed for a few minutes before I sort of drifted mentally from the shores of this scenario. What could I conjure up next? I wondered, curling back into the fetal position on my left side. Again I followed this regular breathing pattern but in a faster and in a shallow fashion. Against the background of the green and blue meshing I described to begin with, my visual field was interrupted by a new form. Two vertical axes of tiny star clusters creating two vertical sparkling hazes appeared, coming towards my center in a way that I felt was abrupt or of an almost impertinent manner. Personality traits of this form seemed to me to be less than neutral, and not really something I wanted to entertain very much. So I modulated my breathing pattern in my mental tuning lost phase with the being. I then felt the gradual movement of a wave of muscle tension come up my body and through me. It passed up my neck and over the back of my head and face until it gathered around my eyes and mouth before lifting away. It left me pulling a rather silly face, and though not as powerful as what had gone before, was quite pleasant to experience. Perhaps I had been scanned. Later I began to think about loved ones, my missus, my family and others. I went through each of my 3 younger brothers in turn, thinking about what I saw as their various gifts and burdens. I consciously prayed into the universe a wish of good fortune towards them and asked that I could be a good person towards them and my parents to the best of my ability. I felt a sense of nobility in the everyday routine of real life and my job and the plans for the future which myself and my other half are making for a family after we moved to a bigger house in January. I was also given a sense of renewed faith that I could do something creative musically in the future, even though I had been struggling with my scruffy picking style on the guitar. I had made some knockout recordings on Cubase a while back but not had anything outstanding emerging for a while. I then thought about myself for a while. I affirmed to myself that I was not a victim anymore of certain hurtful experiences of the past which I used to justify a sometimes self-destructive aspect of my personality. For example, my weed smoking habit is pretty chronic to the extent that though I don't smoke cigarettes, my lungs are beginning to protest a bit. I wondered about this control I was feeling about these hallucinations. Not something I could take for granted. I shouldn't allow myself to become overconfident, but then again worrying during these experiences had not been an issue. This may be a benefit of the sedentary effect of this compound. I had to cook dinner and do some chores before bedtime tonight and so I wondered about getting up and starting to reintegrate with the real world again. The ironing would blow the cobwebs away to start with. I dressed and went down to begin. The multiple outlines were still in action but not so intense as to preclude the task at hand. I turned on the TV and was delighted to see episodes of Futurama showing. An episode where the fabric of time kept jumping around in a random fashion in a flash of space and stars, accompanied by a digital scratch sound. My missus perhaps was confused by my hearty laughter at these time jumps. But she hadn't been where I had been that afternoon. What can I say? This was one of my most rewarding and interesting tryptamine experiences I have had. It had the signature flavor of ayahuasca visions without the physically testing aspects. It had the inventive potentials of mushrooms, and felt like one of the potential experiences that the human mind was meant to be entitled to know. One experience like this is worth many of the small excursions I have embarked on previously. For example, I went through a stage of having several low-dose 2CB trips, perhaps too frequently, and the effects were somewhat governed by the law of diminishing returns. With an experience like this, it made me feel like I had plenty of food for thought to go on for a good while. Of course I want to go back there, but it will be like a beautiful treat I gave myself occasionally in the right circumstances, just when I need to remind myself of the magic of reality. There are a lot of mixed metaphors in there, but these reveal more about the inadequacy of normal language than an inaccuracy of my story, I feel. There was no sense of nausea, and within 4 hours or so I was back on negotiable ground with the outside world. The rest of the evening after dinner I had some excellent fun on my acoustic guitar, and listened to Abbey Road and some Miles in a silent way. Slept well that night and awoke fine and refreshed.